So good morning to everybody and welcome to today's Performance Excellence Forum. I'm Dick Schroyer, a board member of the Greater Rochester Quality Council, which is an affiliate of the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. Before we begin, a few housekeeping announcements. I'd like to announce that today's program is being recorded, and the recording as well as the presenter deck will be available through the GRQC website. Closed captioning is available for this program. To enable it on your device, just click on the CC icon that you should be able to find on your screen. And out of respect for the other participants, we'd ask that everyone remain on mute unless you're speaking. GRQC's mission is to stimulate and foster excellence in the products, services, and processes of all organizations and businesses in our community. The council is made up of members who are dedicated to collaboration and the demonstration of proven quality methods. We have an exciting lineup of programs for 2024. Our next program on April 24th will feature Franklin Allen, Director of Quality and Continuous Improvement at Gorbel, talking about their Platinum Award-winning De-Stuff It implementation project. We encourage you to visit our website at www.grqc.org for more details about this and other upcoming programs. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us at this Performance Excellence Forum titled, How Quality is Integrated into Agile Development and Management Processes. Our speakers today are Jim Peer and Greg Kauffman from Paychex, and they want to encourage your questions and plan to leave plenty of time after their presentation for discussion and collaboration. So we invite you as they go along to enter your questions into the chat, and the speakers will address them during the discussion period. So, Agile software development stands at the forefront of methodologies for creating software. In this session, our speakers will lay the groundwork with a brief overview of Agile software development. From there, they'll delve into best practices, tooling, and real-world examples from Paychex that seamlessly integrate quality into the processes. The iterative nature and philosophies of Agile not only drive software development, but also foster a culture of quality, offering valuable insights to individuals and organizations who are dedicated to pursuing excellence. So at this time, it's my privilege to introduce our speakers, Jim Peer and Greg Kauffman. In addition to thanking Jim and Greg, we want to express our appreciation to Paychex, both for supporting GRQC as an advocate-level member, and also for making it possible for Jim and Greg to take the time to be a part of today's program. Be sure to look for the feature article on Paychex that will appear in the upcoming issue of the GRQC newsletter. So, Jim Peer is the Senior Director of the Paychex Enterprise Program Office. Jim has over 25 years of experience in information technology, holding positions in all aspects of software development and management. He led Paychex from waterfall to agile software development. In his current position, Jim ensures that Paychex has a full product roadmap and ensures that all 206 Agile teams are executing on projects according to the Paychex standards. Greg Kauffman is the Senior Manager of the Paychex Enterprise Program Office. Greg has over 20 years of experience in IT across multiple industries, holding positions in many aspects of software development. Greg was an integral part of the transition from waterfall to Agile as the original pilot Scrum Master at Paychex. Greg has coached and stood up Agile in large parts of the organization. Greg manages the project office and is responsible for project management and Agile processes, guidance, tooling, and standards for the Enterprise Program Office. So Jim and Greg, it's my pleasure at this point to turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. You want to lead in, Jim?
Yeah, I'll fire away. Why don't we hop into the first slide? Appreciate everybody's time, and Dick, appreciate the nice intro there. Really just a real short agenda, but what we really wanted this group to start thinking about in this presentation is how Agile concepts, can spark some ideas and how to improve quality in your world. And we'll talk a little bit about how Agile is really a software development practice, but I think there's a thing that we've learned along the way that you might be able to apply. So today we'll just do one slide on what is Agile for those you who don't know. We'll talk about how I would say Agile is quality is naturally built into our Agile processes, and this will be a big theme today. We'll talk about concepts within the Agile framework itself that focus on quality. We'll certainly go into some examples that we've experienced in Paychex, and then definitely want to leave time for all sorts of questions. So at the highest level, what is Agile? When we think about software development, there's a couple approaches, and for those who've been around for a while, for years, software development was typically a waterfall type development framework. And what I mean by that is, somebody would have an idea for some software. They'd write up a project charter. We'd get some requirements. We'd do some design. Then we'd actually code it. Then we'd hand it to testers. We'd fix some bugs, and then we'd ultimately release that. And what, in that process, it was very laborious and a lot of upfront work versus an agile process, which is a lot more iterative, which allows us to discover things early, adjust early. So you don't have this large investment upfront of resource and time defining something that, in my experience, could be 6 months to even longer to actually just get through requirements and design. And now we're able to, with Agile, take concepts and quickly turn those around to say, yeah, I got an idea. And, within several weeks, I can have teams working on that with the idea of we're constantly delivering product in an iterative fashion to our clients or customers where they're producing value more quickly. So that's the concept between Agile and Waterfall. As of December of 23, 71% of IT companies use Agile. So you get a sense of, that's where the industry's been for the last 10 plus years, and people running Waterfall. Not to say it's not a bad tool to use. There's projects that actually fit very nicely for Waterfall. But when you're talking true kind of software development, this is really the way of the future. As I mentioned, we really rely on kind of this iterative short time frame development. We'll talk about 2-week sprints and how we actually churn out code that quickly. And a lot of it is back to the continuously inspecting and making sure that the software that we deliver is quality. And with that, we have checkpoints to make sure that we have concepts such as definition of done to make sure that what we build is to standard. In 2014, we made a very, I'll say, monumental company decision that we were going to transform into Agile, which was steering a ship. Because as Dick mentioned, we have 206 Agile teams. So we are not a small shop of one product. We have 20 plus products with a lot of cross product dependencies as we build software. So we've figured out a way to take Agile and span that to scale. But as I mentioned, that the real goals are to continuously deliver software as quickly as possible with quality and value to our customers.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, rather. As we talk about Agile and how quality is built in, as Jim mentioned, it's iterative, right? There's frequent feedback as part of those iterations, and continuous improvement and quick responses to change are part of that. So when you think about quality and how to create a quality deliverable, when you compare Waterfall to Agile, Agile just is an enabler of quality. And we're going to use that word a lot today because of those mechanisms like frequent feedback. Agile aims to bring obstacles and opportunities to the surface quicker so that companies can make more informed decisions. So you can understand, hey, I have 10 issues to tackle, or do I have 2 issues to tackle? One of the things that we encountered as we went through our journey to Agile was people started to see a lot of issues earlier on, and they started to associate those issues with Agile. And we quickly learned that, well, it's not Agile causing the issues, it's just Agile bringing those issues to the surface quicker. And then synchronized and cohesive approach of Agile empowers an Agile team to achieve goals. I think of this like we want to ask the people who are working on the engine how to improve the engine and make it a higher quality engine, right? So I know, Jim, you love this one especially, but it's getting the folks who are closest to the product, closest to the problems, closest to quality, and getting their feedback on making improvements. And the great thing about Agile, you'll hear terms in the industry like scaled Agile and scaling and this, that, and the other. Agile's pretty easy to scale pretty quickly as long as you're consistent in your methodology. And if we have time and we get to it at the end, Agile can be used for more than IT. It can be used for things like planning one's wedding or a golf tournament. And I'll share some of those experiences if we have time today. Okay, so to talk about Agile, we want to lay a foundation, right? So I don't know if we can raise hands, Dick, in this, but show of hands if you're on video, if you're familiar with Agile already. Got a little wave from Dave, a couple other waves. Okay, so we've got a little bit of knowledge going into this. That's great to know. So let's just lay a foundation. Let's pretend we're on a team together, and there's 7 of us who form that team. And we name our team. That's pretty common in Agile. So let's just call our team Team Gizmo. And Team Gizmo, we decided, hey, we're going to have 2-week sprints. They're going to start on Wednesday morning, and they're going to wrap up 2 weeks later at the end of the day on Tuesday. And we want to make sure they're consistent in length, because as we measure quality, as we measure output, we want to make sure we're consistently measuring those things. So this is just our foundation that we're going to build on today. Okay, great. We have a team. What are we going to work on, right? We've got a team. It's got a great name. We're running 2-week sprints. We need a prioritized backlog. And at Paychex, we have an enterprise definition of ready for things to move from the backlog to the team, so that when one team says something's ready, those other 205 teams, because we have 206 Agile teams, all understand what that means. And we're all using that consistent definition of ready. Definition of ready is so helpful. It's meant to reduce waste for the team. And it's a huge quality enabler, because when a team has clarity around their work, it reduces their churn. It makes sure they're focusing on the right things at the right time, and they're not just knocking work out without understanding the priority and without understanding why it's important to do quality work. So we see this result in higher quality output from our teams. We see this result in more efficient development from our teams, so we can focus on more things. Once a team has a backlog, that's great. What are they going to do with that work? They're going to plan it out. So the team would sit down together. They'd spend a couple of hours. They plan out their work. It's important that it's realistic, and they want to make sure they can complete that in a sprint. And that realistic amount of work helps with quality, because it prevents overextending a team. It prevents burnout, right? If you're having to work a ton, 2 or 3 sprints in a row, the team starts to burn out. We get tired. We're humans, right? And that results in lower quality output from the team, mistakes, misses, things like that. So we want to keep an eye on the health of our Agile teams as well and not burn them out. All right, terrific. We have a team, we have a prioritized backlog, we have a plan, and now it's time to execute that work we've planned. The team gets together every day, and we call this a daily stand-up or a daily huddle or a daily scrum. That's why some people call it scrum. And we spend 10 to 15 minutes and we say, here's what I accomplished yesterday. Here's what I plan to accomplish today. Here are things I need from people, blockers, obstacles. How can I get some help? So as an example, maybe it's day 5 of the sprint and I'm on Team Gizmo with Peer, and I'm working on a performance service. So yesterday I was able to knock out some of my performance service work. I'm really stuck on this other thing. Maybe as part of Jim's update, he's ahead on his work and he says, hey, Greg, I can help you out. That's a high priority for our team. We can swarm on it because we know where we are as a stand-up. And this is really helpful. So it enables that daily inspect and adapt mentality, which is more cultural, I think, than process. And it allows issues to come to the surface quicker so teams can make more informed decisions. Sometimes this results in having to escalate outside of the team because maybe it's a decision that's too big for our team. It empowers the team that knows the problems, like we talked about before with the mechanics, to solve the problems, right? Hey, I'm closest to that. We don't need to escalate to management. I can just work with you, Jim, or Jim can work with me to solve that quicker. I've done that before. I can help you out. And it optimizes how the team spends their time, making sure priority and quality are at the forefront. And then we get into testing. So we're developing, we're having daily stand-up. It's going great. There's several layers of testing and several approaches that people can use. Iterative testing is great. So we don't wait to the end of the sprint to test everything. We test as we go. So we might be testing in day 2 or 3 so that we can make informed decisions the rest of the sprint. So we don't get to day 9 and we don't want to say things like, if we knew that back on day 2 or 3, we would have made a different decision about what we focused on. And then a big thing in IT is automated testing and using technology to test more quickly and also test for things that maybe we didn't specifically intend to impact, but we want to make sure there's no unintended consequences. This enables defects to just pop right to the surface quicker using automated testing. And then we want to do iterative performance testing as well. So I'm sure all of you have smartphones. I'm sure me just saying the word smartphone or phone makes you think about, where is my phone? Is it within arm's reach? Is it in my pocket? I think 10, 15 years ago, when we thought about quality, we didn't think about going on our phone and going to our bank app and it loading in a second or less. But now that's a standard for quality. If I'm going in and I'm updating my bank account and the page takes 20 seconds to load, that's not a quality experience. So a big part of testing is also performance testing to make sure that our results are highly performant. And then we want to track defects. And what happens a lot is we might discover defects in a sprint and make a decision to not work on them right away. Maybe they're not that impactful. Maybe they're, to use an old term, cosmetic. And maybe we want to just, hey, we can fix that later on if we have time. So it just empowers a team to make those informed decisions. And one thing that's interesting about Agile, like I mentioned earlier, issues do come to the surface more quickly. You're expected to find defects. It's a good thing. You want to find those defects as early as possible so you can make an informed decision. And so you don't want to find a ton of defects, obviously, but you want to find those defects earlier. And you're expected to find them and make informed decisions on how to fix them. And this obviously drives quality because it increases the likelihood that issues are discovered earlier, that you find them before your clients or customers, your users find them, and you're making informed decisions about their experience. And it puts a team, a product owner, and a company in a position to make those informed decisions and have discussions about performance, quality, what we want to do as a company, what's the impact of our decisions much earlier. Now, as we build on our sprint, great. We've built a backlog, we've executed, we've had daily stand-ups. The sprint is coming to an end. It's time for us to review our sprint and demo. I think of a demo as basically a show and tell. If you grew up with show and tells in your life, it's basically a show and tell. Here's what we got done. As we close work in our sprint, there's a concept called definition of done. And it's so crucial to be consistent. And Paychex is a global standard for this, much like our definition of ready, so that when our teams say they're done with work and they're done with chunks of work, we all know what that means, right? And that includes it's been tested, the product owner signed off on it, automated tests have been updated, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of things we have to do to close something out. And so sign off by that product owner is such a key thing because we're asking the business and the representative of the customer to say, is this done? Does it meet your liking? Okay, cool. We have to make some adjustments next sprint based on what you've learned. A very popular statement in Agile is, now that I see it, I want X, Y, and Z. And we see this in all aspects of our life. Like Jim, you and I see this all the time where, hey, I saw this presentation we're going to do for GRQC. Now that I see it, I know that's what I wanted to do, but let's make this adjustment based on how that pre-read went. And we all do this in our life frequently. It's built into Agile, and it definitely enables quality. It's that iterative checkpoint and review to dial the rest of the plan. So you might get through a sprint, a demo, a sprint review, and say, the next 4 sprints we were planning on doing certain things. Let's adjust that based on what we just learned in the last 2 weeks. And to me, that's very healthy. We talked about definition of done and definition of ready. At Paychex, we also have a concept of definition of ready to release. So we might wait a couple of sprints to release. We might release every 2 weeks, depending on the nature of what we're working on. And there's certain quality criteria that must be met prior to these releases to ensure that we have a quality customer experience. Automation tests are updated. Certain folks need to sign off, performance testing. There's a list of things for maintainability and quality long-term that are part of our definition of ready to release. And obviously this helps quality, right? It's intended to help quality. And it helps that everything we release is consistent. If you work on team 1 or team 206, our customers don't know that. They just know there's this consistent quality coming from Paychex. All right, our sprint ended. We had a sprint retro or a sprint review, a demo. We got feedback from ourselves at daily stand-ups. We received feedback from the demo. People can say, hey, now that I see it, I want to do this. Question for you as a team, why did you do it this way? Now it's time to focus how we want to evolve as a team. So we call this a team retro or retrospective. It's normally intended to have no managers. So it's an open, safe place for the team to talk about typically what went well, what opportunities do we have to improve? And then we don't want to go after 10 opportunities, but what are the things we want to focus on the next sprint or next set of sprints to improve as a team? And this is one of those culture things. It's a culture of continuous improvement. You don't have to wait till the retro to improve your team, but it's an opportunity to take a breath, take in all that feedback and say, as a team, what do we want to do moving forward? What do we want to tune? This is a quality enabler because it empowers those people closest to the process to tune things, to make it higher quality, to make the machine that they're running higher quality. And it enables the team to produce higher quality deliverables, right? That's the whole goal. One example I have is I was on a team as a Scrum Master probably 6-7 years ago. They were called Red Hot Scrummy Peppers. So teams tend to have fun names, right? And the team rotated who released code. So 5 people rotated. And as we went through, there was a couple little things that hit us that resulted in a lot of stress and strain when we did releases. So one of the team members said, I want to run retro this time. And we ended up having a retro. And I think it was, hey, everybody draw a car on the whiteboard and then describe why you drew that car that way. And it became very apparent that the team was stressed about releases and the different processes and preferences each person had. So 2 of the teammates said, hey, next sprint, we want to build a process that makes our release process and our steps consistent. And after that, it was smooth. We measured how much time it would take and no defects escaped to production. So it was a big win by the team and a great example of how to use a retro to make things higher quality on your team. And so I want to zoom out for a second. I went through all of those and we can go back to them if you want to during questions and collaboration time. But we had Team Gizmo. They had 2-week sprints. As we go through the process, sprint 1, we found 4 defects and we closed them and we released to production on week 2. Sprint 2, we found 2 more defects. We closed them and we released everything to production on week 4. And then sprint 3, we found a defect. We closed it. We released our projects done. We had 7 defects. We closed them all. We got it done in 6 weeks. So great success story. When we talk about waterfall with similar projects, and as Jim mentioned, waterfall is effective in certain situations. In some situations, it elongates the process. So, you know, the old example, plan, execute, and then test, and waiting to the end to test, right? So you're kind of backed into a corner of making decisions because you've got to hit a deadline. We've all been there. We release week 8, 3 defects escape to production. So we've got to fix those defects, test, and release again. This is a common example of, hey, there's more defects that escape to production. It takes longer to release a higher quality product when you use waterfall versus Agile. And this is one of the main concepts behind going to Agile and why it's so powerful. All right. Well, thank you for letting me run through that with you. I'll hand things over to Jim to talk about some measurements.
All right. As part of our build out of our enterprise Agile practice, we realized over the course of time that we wanted to get insight into how teams were performing. So we kind of built our own dashboard to get a sense of, hey, where are teams doing well and where are they struggling a little bit? And the concept was not to berate teams or tell them they're not doing well, but more a team tool to say, hey, where can we improve? So we allow teams, we have visibility across the board for every team in Paychex, can see how everybody else is doing. So they get a sense of where everybody's at and where they can improve. And the way we built this dashboard is really into 3 buckets. So the very left side, what we call agility health data, one of the things that we ask teams to do is every 6 months, we have a tool that allows them to do a self-assessment. So we have a facilitator come in, ask a series of questions and along different areas such as, does the team have clarity? Does the team have good leadership? Does the team have good partnership, collaboration, those types of things? And the team assesses themselves. And then they also get a score from outside or their stakeholders that are asking for things from the team. So our product folks that are asking for things. So you can see there that, on these teams in general, we roll these things up into programs. So we get program views, but basically there's a stakeholder confidence score, a team score just in general of how they're doing, and what we call a triangle score, which is the key leaders on an Agile team and how they're rating. And those are based on numbers of 100. So I look at it as it's a nice perspective of how a team thinks they're doing. And then we compare that to the middle section, and they can see visibility into, I'll just call very hard facts about the team. So we measure things such as team stability, very important within Agile. The more a team stays together, the more efficient they become in terms of how they run their normal stand-ups, their operating cadence. They get to know how each other work, and they gel together. If you start to have turnover on the team, your stability, we measure stability if a person leaves, and they get replaced after 6 months, that number goes up. We have some measurements around that, but we watch that. And then the next 3 buckets are allocations of the team. So we have a scrum master that's a leader on a team, a product owner, and a solution lead. And then basically we need half a scrum master on a team, half their time. So a scrum master spans 2 teams, a product owner does, and a solution lead is fully dedicated. So occasionally we have times where we will expand, and sometimes we don't have all the resources. So we'll ask people to span 3 teams. And it's good insight to know that, hey, I might have a scrum master that's stretched a little too thin, and we're seeing some productivity or quality issues. Those are just other insights that we have into the team. We also measure how many open positions they have on the team and how many people have been hired into that team over the last 6 months. So it gives an overall flavor of, is this a new team? Is this an experienced team? Do they have turnover? We also measure overtime. Is the team killing it on overtime? Are we killing this team, or are they, having a good work-life balance? So just another input to understand where the team is at. And then finally, my third bucket, my favorite bucket, is the cold hard facts. So what we do here is we we look at the last 7 sprints of data for teams, and we look to see how many defects did they have in terms of escaping, where they didn't find them and they made their way into our last staging environment before it goes to production. We look at measurements such as what we call story commit to complete. So tying to a sprint, a team might say, I'm going to do 20 points worth of work, and they only do 15 points for a particular sprint. So they might be at a 75% commit to complete. So we measure that to just say, is the team effectively planning? Are there other things going on there that they should be looking at? So story commit to commit and points to commit to complete. I won't go into the nuances of the 2, but that's the concept. In the last 2, readiness is, as Greg mentioned, when teams start out, they have a backlog of work. Well, one of the things we want to make sure is that a team always has a full backlog of well-defined work that they can go after. The worst thing we could have is a team sitting idle, waiting for work to be defined. So we have a standard that a team should have at least the current sprint worth of work defined, and at least 1 full sprint of work that's also defined, ready to go in case they move a little faster. So these are probably the most key metrics that we watch in terms of making sure that a team is fully armed with the right resources, the right allocations, and then ultimately, how are they doing against their plan? And every 6 months, I will get with my leadership team, and we will basically go through the health of all 206 teams. And at an enterprise level, we look for trends across the board. If we start to see, a couple of years ago, we saw an issue with backlog readiness, and we started to realize that we might have to do some training in general with our product folks, and we did that and saw those numbers jump. So we manage at a micro level, but then we also manage at an enterprise level to use the data to make course corrections as needed. So if you go to the next slide, Greg. And this is really, as I mentioned, we look at seven sprints worth of data on the previous slide, and then we start to trend that year over year. So some of the key metrics that we look at is velocity, which is basically how much points a team gets done in a sprint, and then we roll that up at, over the course of a sprint across Paychex in the 200 teams, how many points are we getting on average per team? And then we trend that over the course of time to say, in general, the expectation from my leadership is that we should be getting better at velocity. We should be more efficient. We should be figuring out things. We should be using automation, or the newest thing is we should be using AI that would help automate some code development. So I would expect our velocity to go up. So those are things that we use to measure that. And again, on the quality side, one of the big things that we watch is the number of defects that get into our pre-prod environment, and that's probably the most important. As as you can imagine, Paychex with the products that we have in terms of running payroll for clients, managing the retirement plans and their insurance plans. Those are very, very important. Our software needs to be pristine. People are banking on us. So the quality is at the forefront, and then we measure the trending of that quality over the course of time through escape defects. All right, Greg, bring us home.
Thanks, Jim. And so we wanted to talk about how quality has impacted our culture at Paychex, right? Because all of our teams and all of the leaders at Paychex want to deliver great results, right? We want to deliver exciting experiences to our clients. We want to do it without working 60, 70, 8 hours a week. And so as we went through that journey, Agile itself it's a mindset and it's a culture. It's looking for that opportunity to improve. It's inspecting and adapting, right? Those words sound fluffy, but behind them are a lot of great, healthy things. And as we went through our journey with Agile, it's greatly improved our culture. It gives teams clarity. I think that's one of the higher ratings we see in those agility health assessments Jim mentioned. We've seen clarity increase dramatically since 2014. And it gives the teams a sense of ownership and empowerment, which, as you probably already know, results in more investment, better work from the team. And we track that culture, like Jim said, and we have structured conversations about it to say, hey, is there something we can help you with? Is there something outside of the team that you need to deliver more effectively, to increase your culture, to deliver higher quality? And our data shows that higher quality deliverables, faster, higher team morale, less overtime since that switch in 2014. And we continue to look for improvements, like you saw on that last chart, to say, how can we make our defect rate even lower? And so other applications of Agile, they're all around us. Embarrassingly enough, I guess, for me, we started our Agile journey in 2014. Shortly after that, I got engaged. And I'm like, I'm going to use Agile to plan our wedding. And my now wife thought I was a little bit crazy. We planned our wedding in 6 weeks using 1-week sprints. There was originally about 700 people that we were going to invite, and we realized quickly we had to adjust, and we dialed that down to about 275, 300 with 250 attendees. It was a wedding, but it was also a rehearsal dinner, and my wife has a lot of family from out of town, so we did an event for out-of-town guests that everyone came to. It was like a mini wedding. It was pretty awesome. We used a board in a spare bedroom, and we had to do, in progress, and done. We didn't meet at it every day, but we met in front of it frequently. And just in case you were wondering, I was not the product owner. I was not the person prioritizing the work. But we were trying to plan the wedding for about 3 weeks, and it was very, there was stress and this, that, and the other. As soon as we went to Agile, it became so much smoother. So I'm, vulnerable in sharing that story with you, but I hope it provides some context outside of IT and Paychex. I also run a golf tournament every year, and I continue to use the same board, and it's an Agile board, to run that golf tournament. It's smaller, it's 50 golfers, 100 people after for food. And then, rightly so, we're using Agile to plan Agile Connect 2024 here in Rochester in September. And Jim, I don't know if you have any other examples from outside of Paychex?
The only one I use is when I plan all my spring activities. I put a little Kanban board together of everything that I know year over year I have to do. And then I dole out those tasks to my wife and kids.
Awesome. All right. So in summary, agile mindset, it's both mechanical in terms of process and it's a culture. It's a mindset. The agile approach of winning iteratively enables quality by bringing things to the surface much quicker so you can make informed decisions. And things like we've talked about today, like definition of ready, definition of done, and definition of release can further boost quality in agile and beyond.
Great. Thank you, guys. This was really interesting. And I can tell by what's in the chat that there's a very high level of interest in these topics because we got a lot of ground to cover. So while people are digesting that and thinking maybe of other questions they want to ask, another invitation. I know there are some folks in our audience today who are members or representatives of other local organizations that focus on Agile. And I'd invite you to put the name of those organizations and a website in the chat if you'd care to, so that others here can consider exploring these other communities of practice that exist within the Rochester area. So let me go back. We're going to start way back at the beginning because the first question came in about how this all got started. So Gregory Keys asks, the decision to go Agile, was it dictated from the top of the organization or did it come up from within?
Yeah, I saw that question, then I saw a couple follow-ups. And to first answer the question, it was yes. Our SVP at the time was, I'll never forget, he was like, we're going to Agile, come hell or high water, and put me in charge of, hey, how do we figure out how to do this? We, had to get outside consulting. And ultimately, we got to a point of, it wasn't even a question of money. It was always a question of how can we move to Agile faster? And with that, what I've learned in several Agile conferences is that's a lot of times not the case. So there was another question there, but having executive sponsorship top down makes things 10 times easier because you'll hear a lot of firms that are trying to, you'll get developers are like, yeah, we should go Agile, we should try to do it, and becomes a grassroots effort to try to sell the executive team on that, which can be a tough process. So having top-down endorsement makes the world a difference. It was the number one thing to help us convert.
It's always easier when you don't have to get your management on board.
Yeah.
So with that removed as a barrier, what were some of the most difficult parts of the transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a couple things. One was certainly we had to figure out how. So that was actually the easiest. Like we just got training. We came up with a plan of, Greg was one of our first Scrum Masters, and we said, let's get a couple teams stood up, figure this out. And then once we kind of figured out, it was more of a scaling operation. There was definitely a cultural mindset shift in terms of a lot of people were used to waterfall and had difficulty wrapping their head around what do you mean by incremental deliveries and these concepts. We can't get anything done in 2 weeks. So there was definitely a cultural barrier and mindset that we had to fight through a little bit. And we actually knew that we were going to probably take a little hit on attrition through the transition because some people are just not, up for change and not for them. So we kind of went in eyes wide open that, hey, there's going to be some bumps along the road. But I'd say in general, it was getting over the hump of understanding what we were trying to accomplish. And at the end of the day, it's very interesting because there's certain things that we still do today that we did when we were in waterfall. We still build a roadmap. So Agile doesn't replace things like that. You need to know what you need to do. And you need to plan out in the future of here's the company strategy and here's what we'd like to do. Now here's how we execute. And I think Greg had a great slide in comparing Agile versus waterfall where, like I said, we front loaded everything in waterfall and now we're finding things along the way, adjusting, and it creates a level of transparency where you can't hide from where a team is at. We know week over week how you're doing on a project or sprint over sprint every 2 weeks. I know if they're ahead or behind, that type of concepts, though. Big win for us there.
Excellent.
And I think one thing to note when we went through that journey was how do we pair project management with Agile, right? Because they pair so well together. It's not we're doing Agile in lieu of project management. We're still managing risk, we're managing change, we're managing cost and communicating that.
Yeah.
So it's just finding that balance of how that project management system evolves in Agile.
Yeah, good
Nice
point.
that they go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We've got several questions here about the makeup of the teams in Agile. I was going to read a couple of these together because I think rather than treating them separately, some of the answers might go together as well. So Gregory Keys asks, how much does having a well-defined architecture play into the success of Agile? Or put another way, how do you ensure one team doesn't step on another team's work?
Yeah.
Terry,
Oh,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, yeah,
You're wrapping up.
Terry Callanan asks, are people on more than one team? If so, is there a risk they may not be able to deliver on their daily commitments for each team?
Yeah, I can hit a couple of those. I'll start with the latter one. So our core Agile team is made up of the following: a dedicated solution lead. They're kind of the lead engineer on the team. And I would say a couple of years ago, I'd say 4 years ago, it would have been 4 developers, heads down developers, whether they're front end, back end. We like to have a mix on a team so they can do both front end and back end development. And usually 2, I'll call them testers, quality engineers, whatever you want to call them. Paychex has kind of morphed from that because we don't do any manual testing anymore. We have some manual spot checking, but in general, all our testing is automated and need people on the teams that can actually write unit test scripts and more automated tests. So our makeup is now more, I'll call it 6 developers on the team, all with the capability to do both development and testing. So more generalizing specialists. So they are fully dedicated to the team. And then the Scrum Master / project manager, they are half dedicated to the team. We usually have them on 2 teams. Same with our product owner, along with an analyst. So that would be kind of the core team. With that, that should tie to the other question about architecture. So we also have teams and Paychex that I would say are ancillary to the Agile teams that provide shared services, such as performance testing. So specialized group that says, hey, I've built something. I don't need just regular testing, but I need to throw load at it, concurrency, that type of thing. Also, architecture. In architecture, we don't have them sit on Agile teams, but what we do, kind of tying to the more waterfall-y part of our process, is that as we build our roadmap and we lay out, next year's plan, we know what projects there are, and what we want to do is make sure that those teams, when they're ready to start, are armed on day one with clarity of what they are supposed to build, how they're going to build it, and what it's going to look like. So in our process, we actually back into providing collaterals for the team. So the key 3 ones are: 1, they have a clear project charter. And I'm not talking 40 pages of charter. I'm talking 2 or 3 pages. Here's what we want. 2, we actually then have an architect go off and figure out what is, the Paychex standards in terms of our toolbox of solutioning. If we have to introduce new technology, that type of thing. So they will come up with I'll call it an architectural approach document. And then finally, we have our UX team deliver, I'll call a high-level vision. So if it's a UI type solution, then the team will have something to look at to say, okay, here's what the screen's high level should look like. And then they'll get detailed designs along the way. So we have these ancillary teams that support the Agile teams. And one of our goals is to make sure constantly that teams are armed with well-defined work. We pay developers and engineers a lot of money. We don't want them fumbling through requirements. We want them coding. So that's kind of our philosophy.
Okay, great, thanks. And Franklin had a question about the makeup of the teams and how do you decide what that looks like? I think your response probably addresses that.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So this is an interesting question. We've all been through the pandemic and the switch from in-person to remote work. And I know some companies have had trouble getting folks to come back. So the question is, how has your Agile approach changed when you move from an in-person to a remote environment?
Yeah, that was COVID hit. We had to, just like everybody else, had to figure out like on a dime, because we were a company that was based in our core on Agile Principle 101 at the time we were trained of co-location. As part of our transformation, we actually, not only did we have significant organizational changes in terms of moving people to new roles, but also went through a whole new seating organization where we put all those Agile team members together, where in the past, like product owners sat in the product space and developers sat in their space, and we actually co-located Agile teams as a team. And we started out with, building, and our planning was all using sticky notes on walls until we got into Jira and tooling that we kind of evolved to. So at the time COVID hit, we at least had the tooling in place between Jira, which allowed us to manage our work. And through the use of other tools like Miro, where we're able to collaborate, we were able to very quickly transition into a work from home environment. And based on where we are today, that policy is still in place. And in fact, over the last several years, one of the good things of COVID, it expanded our recruiting area from not just Rochester, but to the United States. So we were able to actually get, better talent in because we had a bigger pool to choose from. And now we're in this spot of, I don't think we can ever go back because now I have Agile teams that are spread across the country. And I think we're operating fine. We outside and I think we put a visual together a couple of years ago where we started trending some of the velocity things. And we were able to tell a very compelling story of, hey, our velocity was on the rise. And then we saw COVID hit. We took a little bump in velocity as we figured that out. So about a 2-month adjustment period. Then we were back on the rise. And then the second bump that we hit was a couple of years ago, the war on talent, when we were struggling to find talent and having some significant attrition in comparison to what we usually have. And then, we're back up to where we are and now starting to see that steady growth of velocity. And our next big thing is really, as I mentioned, banking on AI as being hopefully another move where we can, have test automation, code generation, those types of things that will, again, help jumpstart Agile teams.
Oh, Dick, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're
Now,
good.
this may be a simple question or it may not be, but there are any projects where you would choose waterfall over Agile? Any
Yeah, I can
types of
take this one,
projects?
Jim.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, to me, I think of some of our infrastructure projects and things where you just have to do a set of actions serially and you know what they are, and it's going to take you 5 months. Waterfall might be a great solution for you to stand up some new data centers or some servers, et cetera. Also, when we look at maybe some of our security projects, sometimes it just makes sense to do things in order. So there is a time and a place for waterfall, and there's value. I would say, Jim, that 90-something% of our projects are through Agile.
Yeah. Yep. But it's in our toolbox for sure.
Yeah. Mark Almeter has a question. It says, Agile, like Lean and Six Sigma, is an effective way to deliver high-quality working software in a just-in-time manner, but sometimes the human element gets in the way, leadership or lack thereof, in terms of implementation. What implementation challenges have you faced?
It's a great question. Can
Yeah,
you read the question again, Dick? I'm sorry, Greg, if you have a thought on it.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
It's about the implementation of Agile. Mark's saying that sometimes the human element gets in the way in terms of how it's implemented. And his question is, what are the implementation challenges with Agile that you faced?
Oh, as far as I gotcha, as far as actually implementing the framework and the processing.
Yeah, specifically where the human element got in the way.
Yeah,
More difficult.
I think I hit this one, but I would say that our biggest challenge out of the gate was just the reluctance for change. I think we see this, in general, whenever you're implementing a significant change in a company and people's reluctance to say, why are we doing this? I think even personally myself, I'll never forget being, starting out with the experts and questioning a lot. Like, I don't buy it. You're going to have to convince me. And I did that only because I'm like, I'm going to be one of the people really kind of pushing this into the org, and I got to be bought in 100%. So I know just, for myself to get convinced took a while, because I was a waterfall guy for 15 plus years. And I'm like, yeah, I don't get this. I don't get how we're going to continuously release code. No, we have to have these big releases. We have to have that. And so I think it was through education and, convincing people and a little bit of this is just going to happen. So we were a little probably heavy handed with it. Wasn't up for debate. Hey, do you want to run Agile or do you want to do waterfall? It's like, we are moving this way. So I think it ties back to that executive support we had. Because we had all that, we were armed with all the tools, the money, and the resources to make it successful.
Yeah, and I think, to add to that, when we started to scale, right, we started with 10 Agile teams, and then it was 30, and then it was 40. We could start to see the value, and you could start to hear team members say, this is way better after 6 months, 8 months. And so then when we built up that momentum, it was easier to get to the teams we got to now.
There was a
That
little
initial
grassroots
40
buzz.
was challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely that people want. At first, it was like we picked some teams, and then ultimately, people were like, "How soon can I get trained?"
Yeah, nice, good. Okay, there were a couple of questions around the big definitions, definition of ready, ready to release, and so forth. One of the questions was whether these are company-wide or team-specific, and I think you answered that, but I'll let you take another shot at it. If they were company-wide, how was buy-in achieved, and who defined what they were? And a related question is, you said that high quality requirements are essential. How do you decide that they are, quote, ready in the context of these definitions to be implemented by the Agile teams?
Yeah, Jim, I'll take the definition of ready and definition of done. That was through
Sure.
inspect and adapt. So we started with a definition. We got feedback from folks on the teams, and we continued to adjust that. And so that's global throughout Paychex, but some teams might add on to it based on their specific needs. If they're working on a specific technology, or maybe they work with the government a lot, they might have additional definitions of ready and done on top of our global standards.
Yeah, no, that's great, Greg. And then what I would add to that, as we started to scale, we agreed as a company that we had to have standards. Paychex, outsources roughly 50 Agile teams that are fully outsourced to other companies. So as part of that onboarding process, we had to establish very clear standards of what's expected as we sign contracts with them. So we started to standardize those expectations just as a means to make sure they were doing what we wanted to do. The other thing that we realized that we started to standardize too was things like when we first started out, we had teams that were like, we gave it options. You can be on a 3-week sprint or a 2-week sprint, it's your choice. But when we got to 200 plus teams and we started getting feedback on, hey, I'm trying to sync up with this team, but they run 3-week sprints, so I'm concerned. I'm confused at when they start and stop. So we actually established our all 206 teams all run on the same 2-week sprint cadence, with our projects being very complex and more than 50% of our projects at least having 2 Agile teams that needed to get work done in different disciplines. That enabled us to have very simple ways of planning where I could say, I'm the lead team on project X. By the way, I need some work done from this team, and I broker a deal with them to say, I need this done by, sprint 18 of the year. And that's a mechanism for how we plan and the way teams communicate.
Thank you. Okay, we're nearing the end, but I wanted to get one last comment in here, and if we missed any, we'll try to address them offline. But Greg emphasized that he and Jim wanted to take ideas from folks and not just questions. So there's an thought here from Susan Pletner. And I'm going to read a little bit of it here. I'm finding that more companies are departing from 2-week sprints and moving to Kanban. Often for this reason, in the Kanban mindset, time is not spent with planning what we're going to do during the next 2 weeks. Just keep the backlog in priority order so that the highest priority items are worked on first. The time spent planning out work for the next sprint is now given back to do more productive things with. There are still regular planning prioritization meetings to prioritize backlog. So Greg, Jim, you have any, I'm sure you've or we're familiar with this. Do you have any thoughts on the different approaches?
I do. It's a fantastic question, and I'll answer it two ways. We do run Kanban for some of our teams, and where we really earmark that as what I would call keep the lights on type work. So we have kind of a queue for I'll call it break fix types things that happen in production or small enhancements. So for each one of our product lines, I would say in general we have a team or teams that kind of manage that type of Kanban work. Where we use more Scrum and sprint planning is because we are still primarily a very project-based organization. So we still, as much as we're running Agile, it's all in the guise of I'm doing a project to deliver something. And we have to do that for a couple of reasons. One, we are very rigorous in projects and definition of ROI. So we have to know, what we're building and what we're going to get the return on. So there's that component of projects that we have to have where, sprint planning lends itself to because we have to track that project. And two, we capitalize our software. So from a financial perspective, we also are running projects to capture all those costs. So, it's one of those things like we even said, we run things that are waterfall. We run things in Agile. We run flavors of Agile between Kanban and Scrum. And it really depends on the type of project that we're trying to accomplish. So I think it's nice to have those levers to pull. But I'd say in general, based on the type of work that we do, most of our work is new feature development, product based. And that's why we're focused more on the Scrum aspect of everything.
Great question. Thank you. And thank you for the ideas. We are nearing the end here, so we're going to have to wrap up. I do want to point out one thing in the chat. Chris Freda put in information about Rock Agile and an upcoming meeting that they have. So if anybody's interested, we'll try to get that link out to everybody along with the other notes. So just a couple wrap-ups here. For quality professionals who maintain ASQ certifications that require periodic recertification, please note that participation in today's Performance Excellence Forum qualifies for ASQ recertification units. You can request those and information will be handed out. We do have an evaluation survey that we do after each of these programs. I just put the link in the chat. We would be grateful if some of you would take a few moments to complete the survey. It's very short, but your feedback helps us improve our programs and gives us ideas for new programs. So the link's in the chat, and we will send that out to everybody who registered in case you don't have time to grab that right now. So we hope you're leaving today with ideas and insights that you can use in your organization and maybe in your home life. Thank you, Greg, for sharing that. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about upcoming programs. If you'd like to suggest a topic or speaker, you can use the Contact Us form on the homepage or respond to the question in the evaluation survey about ideas for additional topics. So once again, as we close, I'd like to thank Jim and Greg for today's fantastic presentation. Clearly a lot of interest from the questions. We appreciate that. And we thank all of you for taking time out of your work days to attend. So goodbye, everyone, and thanks again.